Los Angeles has always led the way. Today, we come together. One city, Angelinos all. To transcend our differences, to meet our collective challenges, and to define our mutual dreams. To remember where we came from, and to decide where we need to go. Fellow Angelinos, I will never forget where I came from, and I will always believe in the value of every Angelino. This is truly our town, and we all have a contribution to make.
If you don't know about the Watts Towers, it was built by an Italian immigrant named Simon Rodia over the course of 34 years. This was a guy who'd come home from work, bring back broken glass, bottle caps, and other disregarded objects, and essentially created this beautiful work of art that's lasted over time, and it's become a metaphor for LA. This city of dreams, the city of hope, this city where the world comes together.
Simon Rodia was asked to explain the meaning of his work. I had in mind to do something big, and I did it. Fellow Angelinos, let's dare to dream. Let's dare to dream together.
I'm speechless. Thank you for putting that video together. It was a surprise. Didn't hear that there'd be a video until last night. Thank you to the Conference of Mayors, to Tom Cochran, to Elizabeth Kautz for that very, very special introduction. Mayors, please put your hands together for Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake and the great people of Baltimore. Thank you so much for your warmth and hospitality, for taking us into your town and treating us and feeding us like family. Baltimore has given so much to our country and to our history. The Star-Spangled Banner, the fiction of Edgar Allan Poe, not to mention 5 seasons of The Wire. It's fitting that we come here to one of America's most historic cities at this critical time when so much is at stake for so many of our people. I want to thank Tom Cochran and the folks at the U.S. Conference of Mayors for fighting for the vast majority of Americans who silently depend on our metro economies for their lives and for their livelihoods, and for reminding us that cities play a role in virtually everything that matters. And of course, thanks to our outgoing president, Mayor Elizabeth Kautz of Burnsville, Minnesota. Whether rescuing community development block grants from the chopping block or carrying the urgent message of local leadership on global climate protection, Mayor Kautz has led the conference with a tireless spirit, and a no-nonsense attitude. Thanks to her hard work, we're hitting the ground running in 2011. So please join me once again in a heartfelt thank you to Mayor Elizabeth Couts. Mayors, there is no greater compliment than the confidence of your colleagues. I've said many times that I understand full well that while I may be the mayor of a city with a big stage, that every one of us, small city, medium-sized city, big city, all have the same challenges. And I want to thank you for 6 years of learning from so many of you. I want to thank you for the confidence you've placed in me. It's my hope that in the year to come, we can grow even stronger. That will be not just a collection of mayors, but a catalyst for change. You see, we need to lead the national conversation about what America must do to put people back to work. It's fitting that we're here, meeting just a few miles outside of the Beltway. Hopefully they can hear us all the way from Baltimore, because the thinking has got to change inside the Beltway bubble. And that's what it is, a Beltway bubble. Our cities are far removed from the partisan paralysis and the philosophical abstractions debated in Washington. And we saw that here today. You know, there are differences among us, but every single time that we have had a difficult issue before us, we've been able to figure out where the common ground is. Every single time, whether it was the resolution on the war, whether it was last year's resolution on immigration, every single time we have figured out. You see, our mayors know better. Our mayors know what a double-digit unemployment rate means and the real pain our families suffer every single day. As mayors, we can see the wreckage of the Great Recession all around us. We have entire cities swamped by the mortgage crisis, whole neighborhoods left high and dry to blight and rot. In community after community, we've seen families cut adrift when an anchor employer pulls up stakes for a $2 a day labor abroad. Now, the stock market is back to 12,000, and that's supposed to be good news. It's good news, at least for some people. But mayors know better. We know what's good for Wall Street isn't necessarily good for Main Street. By and large, throughout this crisis, it's been our nation's mayors responding creatively, as first responders always do, manning the front lines, making the most difficult choices in the toughest circumstances, and working to protect the most vital services our people depend on for their daily lives, from streets to police to safe drinking water. Now, this is a bipartisan organization, and mayors here, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, have taken on issues like pension reform. We've not divided between Republican and Democrat. We all know that these pension and benefits aren't sustainable right now. And mayors, you and I have seen something else. We've seen how even in tragedy, in Tucson, Tuscaloosa, and Joplin, the worst calamities can bring out the best in our people. We know what's possible when a community comes together for a common purpose without rancor or party label. You know, if you hire a legislator to talk, you hire a mayor to act. And the American people desperately need us to act now. Mayors, I would humbly submit to you that this is our time. This is our time to lead. We have to be willing to speak the truth and speak boldly with one voice And it starts with this truth: we've got our work cut out for us. But it would be wrong to ignore our critics and the obstacles in our way. We've all seen firsthand the campaign to marginalize our cities. We've seen it typecast on various news outlets. But it's important to keep the debate rooted in some historic perspective. You see, it's an old story, part of an age-old debate that has existed between the forces of ruralism and the forces of pluralism. The ruralists, of course, found voice most famously in the philosophy of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who called cities, and hear me now, the abyss of the human species. It's a view that's always looked upon cityways with suspicion, casting our cities as unwelcoming clusters of other Americans who can't possibly be real Americans. But the pluralists always knew better. They actually knew it from the start. They knew cities were about the future. They knew it from the first mud walls of the first city ever built. Cities always stood as islands of civilization in a vast and unpredictable world. Across the globe, cities rose as centers of trade, as crossroads of culture, as meccas of progress. We owe our wealth to cities, and we owe our wealth to metro economies. We owe our deepest values to the birth of democracy and civil society that sprung up in our cities, where without the luxury of space, people learned to coexist, where they gave up the go-alone survival mentality in favor of a belief in a greater human enterprise. In the 21st century, our cities stand as our best hope for the future. Now, today we released our Metro Economies report. And once again, as metro economies go, so goes America. Our cities are not just the engine, they're the engine, the axles, the chassis, and the door handles of the nation's economy. Our metro areas generate some 90% of our gross domestic product. We've known that for some time. But something new. Next year, they'll account for 94% of new jobs. Now, I want you to think for a moment. If LA were a country, we'd be the 18th largest economy in the world, bigger than Taiwan or Saudi Arabia. Philadelphia's economy is larger than Argentina. Houston's is bigger than Venezuela. Now, it's time to come together. It's time to say that the era of the city versus the suburb is over. We can no longer afford to see our competition at our city limits. Not when our nation's economic future depends so clearly on the growth of vibrant economic and cultural zones strong enough to compete across the globe with Shanghai and London. In fact, we know it's no longer Chicago, it's Chicagoland. LA isn't so much a city as a regional powerhouse, connected by the nation's busiest seaports, spanning a media market of 18 million people. And across our country, our mayors get it. Seattle and King County aren't competing, they're marketing jointly to create jobs. And they've teamed up with their neighbors in Canada to win the battle of the Pacific Rim. Now, I'll tell you where we need to start. We've got to break the old Washington mindset with its fixation on funding states at the expense of our metro economies. Much as the pluralists did in another era, we have to force the question, where would we be in the United States of America without our cities? As Tom Cochrane likes to say, if you take New Orleans out of Louisiana, what have you got? You got East Dakota. In 2008, our top 10 metro areas, and I want you to hear me for just a moment, our top 10 metro areas approach the combined economic output of the People's Republic of China. Put another way, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago's economic output are greater than that of 44 other individual states. Roughly the equivalent of the economy of France. Yet, we keep short-changing our cities. It's simple. If we fail to keep our metro economies competitive, the national economy cannot and it will not thrive. We need to take our message to the American people. The last thing our recovery needs is another punch in the gut. Today, we released the 2011 jobs forecast for the nation's 363 metro economies. Now, we can see some encouraging evidence of a dawning recovery. 88% of our metros are projected to experience some job growth in 2011. We know, however, that the recovery has been uneven at best. Nearly a third of our cities will continue to languish through December with double-digit joblessness, including my city, as a matter of fact. What's worse, almost 50 metropolitan areas will essentially lose a decade. They won't get back to their pre-recession unemployment levels for another 10 years. Manufacturing centers like Detroit and Toledo aren't expected to recover jobs until 2020 and beyond. This recovery is going to be a long haul, everybody, and we need to all get help, and we need to work together to get it from Washington. So, mayors, we cannot afford to be timid. We need to tell the Congress loud and clear, at least observe any good doctor's Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. With anemic job projections, the last thing we should do is anything that will slow a speedy recovery. So that means that first and foremost, we can never play politics with the full faith and credit of the United States of America. We cannot stay outside of the debate around the credit debt limit. If we do, we will suffer as a consequence. We have to say that it's time to stop the games. It's time for Congress to get on with the serious business of legislating short and long-term solutions to our jobs crisis. Our cities continue to live with a threat that we could lose $4 billion in the Congress if they cut the CDBG program. When they cut CDBG, they're balancing the budget on the backs of working people, the very families struggling hardest to stay afloat. Now, in too many of our cities, job growth is being choked by traffic and saddled by a sagging infrastructure. We have bus and rail systems at capacity. Our aging roads and bridges are undermining our ability to meet the nation's future economic output. We need to say now is the time to put millions of people back to work by making long overdue investments in our future infrastructure needs. It was interesting, at the Transportation Committee, I don't think I've ever been to a committee with so many people. Why? Because everybody in that committee and everybody in this city, if we could have had a committee of the whole, everybody would have been there. The fact of the matter is, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we have a $2.1 trillion need. With China investing at over 3 times our current rate and even footing the bill to build railways across Europe, we need to pick up the shovels and pick up the pace. We need to tell Congress to press the button on America Fast Forward. Now, we heard from Rahm Emanuel the other day, the new mayor of Chicago. And Rahm talked about an innovative proposal that could and may get bipartisan support. We need to get behind innovative proposals. We have, as you know, a bipartisan financing plan that can create nearly 1 million jobs. It can put people to work today by allowing local governments to creatively leverage local dollars for roads and rail. And we need to make the broader case. With our economic heart faintly beating in our cities, tomorrow's infrastructure investments must be more metropolitan focused, more forward-looking, and more environmentally sustainable. It's time to prioritize spending on metropolitan transportation infrastructure needs. Now, I like to say that my friend, Mr. Nutter, is the king of sound bites. And I'm not sure I got this from you, but let me just share something with you. We got to stand for the proposition that we need to connect people to jobs when we create infrastructure. We don't need another bridge to nowhere that connects the ducks to the geese. That's right. We need bridges that connect people to jobs. We have to stand up for the unemployed workers. We have to be willing to say, like Jeff Immelt said to the president, representing the business community, that with historic joblessness, it makes no sense whatsoever for the House to repeal workforce training programs. How do you get people back to work that are unemployed currently in sectors of the economy that aren't working? You got to give them the skills to put them back to work. We got to reward work. We need to stand for the millions who will see their unemployment checks disappear at the end of the year with no prospects in sight. And mayors, and I think today's resolution understands that, we need to stand for a new world order in federal spending. It's time to bring our investments back home. We can't keep on building roads and bridges in Baghdad and Kandahar and not Baltimore and Kansas City. We can't keep on squeezing non-discretionary, non-defense spending and make the investments we need as a nation to compete. Not when we spend $2.1 million on defense every single minute. Did you hear me? $2.1 million on defense every single minute. Not after nearly $1.2 trillion spent and over 6,000 lives lost in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 1971, someone mentioned earlier, the U.S. Conference of Mayors proudly went on record calling for the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Vietnam. Today we had a debate, and it was a great debate. And it's another reason why I'm so proud to be your president. We had people get up and speak about their service to the nation. We had our war veterans and our former military personnel get up and talk about honoring our troops. And it's time for us once again to make that call. And we made it in a way that says we support our men and women in uniform, that these brave soldiers have served our country proudly, and now we must honor them by addressing our pressing needs at home. We have to invest in our own economy and create jobs for them to come to. And very importantly, we've got to invest in our next generation. And that begins by taking on the one issue we all know will ultimately determine our future course as a nation. You know, there was a time when mayors said that education wasn't in our bailiwick. And I want to acknowledge my friend, Mayor Johnson, because Mayor Johnson has been screaming against the wind. And today, a few days ago, we had an opportunity to have a forum. And in that forum, very interestingly, those ideas weren't Democratic or Republican. There's a consensus in this organization, and we passed a resolution to that effect. We said, let's make this the year that the Conference of Mayors takes on the lead on the pressing issue of education reform. Now, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, whether you have children in our public schools or not, whether as mayors we have the responsibility of running the school district, every one of us all have skin in the game. We know that the future of our cities, more than anything else, depends on providing every single child with access to a quality education. In LA, without mayoral control, and I wanted it, we've been able to elect and re-elect a pro-reform majority on the school board. We've passed one of the most transformative public school choice resolutions in the country. Gives parents a vote and a voice in their child's education. With the mayor's partnership, We've taken over the lowest performing schools in the most underserved neighborhoods. Every day, we disprove the doubters by demonstrating that it's possible to turn around failing schools and bring opportunity to urban campuses. Right here in Baltimore and around the country, in places like New Haven, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Boston, and Detroit, mayors are leading the way. Teachers and school districts are coming together to give students and teachers what they need: higher expectations and greater accountability. A real evaluation system based on multiple measures that doesn't stamp every teacher with the same satisfactory grade. In my school district and in school districts across the state, our state, Ashley, 0.001% of teachers are dismissed. In my school district, 98.3% of our teachers get a satisfactory grade. We need a tenure process that teachers can be proud of, where tenure is earned and comes with a significant salary increase. We need to end the notion that says the last hired should be the first fired. This is an absurd and archaic policy, and it's costing us far too many excellent teachers. We need to support the expansion of high-performing public charter schools. We need to take the Race to the Top program local and allow cities and districts to qualify where they lack a willing state partner. You know, mayors have done it before, and mayors can and must do it again. We can do it if we remember our history. The year was 1932. There were 14 million Americans that were unemployed. Veterans were marching on Washington. Homeowners everywhere were underwater. Responding to the call of the nation's mayors, Congress enacted a $300 million federal assistance program, the first in the nation's history. A few months later, they came together to write the charter of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Mayors led us out of the Great Depression. Mayors led on civil rights. Mayors led when the AIDS epidemic hit. Mayors stood with Mandela when it wasn't popular. There's a magic when mayors stand together. Let's unleash that magic. Let's pull together. Let's send a message to Washington. It's time to stop playing games and start doing the hard work of the American people. It's time to start investing in our future again. It's time to put our people back to work. It's time to accelerate the withdrawal of our troops. It's time for our nation's mayors to take the lead. It's our time. Thank you so much.